I don't know. Um, I have this. When we got the schedule for this, I was given the 7:45 slot on the first night, and everybody is tired. One of the things that I've taught classes at the congregation before on things to do during worship and how to conduct worship, and things to keep in mind. One of the things I always talk about is if you're going to teach or preach or anything, you got to know your audience. You have to know your audience. And so this is one of the questions I pose is that, okay, let's talk about Wednesday night invitation. It's at 7:45. Describe in one word your audience. Tired. They're exhausted. They're exhausted. So this is what I tell people. I said, so when you get up there to do your Wednesday night talk, you have 3 minutes to make your point. If you don't make it in 3 minutes, your audience is gone. So I have quite a task ahead of me, given that it's time for the Wednesday night invitation, and I'm just now getting up here. But I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk about this a little bit. Hopefully, I'll fulfill what Kevin wanted me to talk about. I want to start off tonight with two confessions. The first confession is this: I am not a preacher. I've never actually been a preacher. To be honest with you, I've really never had the desire to be a full-time preacher. Joe Hammondtree and I were talking a couple months ago. We have no idea why we were invited to this. We don't. Maybe we were just the warm bodies that Kevin needed to fill some slots. We knew that when we showed up here that we were going to get our real jobs. Joe felt pretty sure he was going to be driving the bus. I thought my job would be to organize the lunch orders for everyone. And actually, that's jobs we're more than happy to do. And so, but I'm not a preacher. And so I haven't done what all of you are doing. And so there's a lot of experiences that I can't even talk to because I just don't have that experience with me. I love preaching and I love teaching, but I've never been a preacher before. So that's my first confession. My second confession is that for my entire life, including now, I have been a map nerd. Now, I have been suspicious that for my entire life, people have been going behind my back and saying that about me. But this is the first time in 57 years I've actually admitted it publicly. So I am a map nerd. And I've always been that way. I mean, I was probably the only person in my high school graduating class that knew that Rand McNally produced their annual Atlas of the United States on October 1st. Books A Million released it. I was there to get it. And in fact, I have a copy here. This is what the 2000 edition looked like. I mean, look at those vibrant colors. I mean, over 400 maps, updated annually. It was always a big challenge for me to try to find those updates since the previous edition. Mileage and driving times information, travel coupons. What is not to love about this book? So, those are my two confessions, because it's important that you keep that in mind as I give you the rest of this information. You need to know where I'm coming from. I'm not a preacher, and I'm a map nerd. Kevin has assigned me the topic of passion from a pulpit. It is those of us who are speaking, it is our goal to help those of you who are preaching to be the best you can be. Because quite frankly, the kingdom needs you. And we want to help you in any way possible to do that. And my guess is that one of the primary reasons that the elders of the congregations where you work, why they hired you, was to build up and edify your congregation of people. And that's an incredibly important job. It really is. And it's time consuming. And there's a lot of effort involved with that. But probably another aspect of that is to be an effect or encourage friends of your family, of your congregation, or family members of your congregation, or maybe even just people in general in your neighborhood. where your congregation is located, try to encourage them to come. That may be an aspect of it also. And all of you know this, that the way to do that is to build relationships. And so you have to find a way to do that, especially if people, if they're not familiar with religion in general, but specifically some of the things we believe, you have to build these relationships. And so that's one of the things that we want to talk about tonight. And so what I want to do is kind of what Kevin said. I want to talk to you about where I got, how the path I took to get where I am today. And but then make a few points about that. So here's my story, and I'll tell this as briefly as I can. As I said, I've always been kind of a map nerd, and in 2006, my parents took a trip to Israel with Farrell Jenkins. And if you're not familiar with who Farrell Jenkins is, he is a longtime Bible faculty member at Florida College. In fact, he served as chairman of the Biblical Studies Department for a while. But in addition to that, he's a gospel preacher. He's preached for 5-6 decades at a number of different congregations, most of them in the Tampa area. But also, in addition to that, he leads tours and has led tours for over 50 years. He's led over 100 tours. Some of the tours that he has led are tours that I don't know that you can lead anymore. He's led several tours that were around the world tours. They lasted nearly over a month. I don't think you can actually get people to take that much time off from their job or their life to do that nowadays. But of those tours, I would say a majority of them were to the lands of the Bible: Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Greece, Italy, those countries. And a majority of those were to Israel. And so in 2006, my parents traveled with him over there. And they came back from the trip, immediately called me on the phone and said, "You've got to go over there." And at the time, my wife Tabitha and I were raising our kids. We had one that was a teenager and the other two were a little bit younger. And so life was kind of in the way. And so we kind of said, yeah, okay, all right. And we just kind of pushed it off to the side. Then in 2008, my sister and brother-in-law went over there. Her name's Barbara Jo. His name is Norm. They went over there. Incidentally, Norm and Barbara Jo are Zach Hardisty's in-laws. Zach is married to my niece. And so, but in 2008, they went over there. Here they are. They're standing on the top of the tell at Beit Shan. And as soon as they got back, they said, "Barry, you have to go over there. Do whatever you need to do. We'll keep your kids. You got to go over there." And so Tabitha and I thought about it. And so in 2010, we made a trip to Israel. Here we are standing at the, for those of you who've been over there, do you know what this is? Hatzor, very good. He gets a gold star. Yeah, this is at the watchtower at Hatzor, looking up the Hula Valley. Way to go. You get $500 off your next trip. Anyway, he... thundering? Excuse me?
Not thundering then?
It was not thundering then at this point. So we went there in 2010. This is a cliche, what I'm about to say, but is absolutely true. This trip changed my life in every way. I started trying to figure out any way I could to teach people about biblical geography and show how the land plays such an important role. Sometimes people say it's the fifth gospel. In some ways, it kind of is. The land plays such an important role in the biblical narrative. And so I wanted to do everything I could to help teach people with that. So in 2011, I made a trip to Tampa to talk to Farrell. I have known Farrell my whole life. The very first Bible class teacher that I can remember, being 3 or 4 years old, is his mother, Vera Jenkins, at the Jordan Park congregation in Huntsville, Alabama. And so I drove all the way down to Tampa to talk to him. And I asked him dozens, if not hundreds, of questions. And he very patiently answered every single one of them. So in 2012, I decided to go back to Israel on a tour with Farrell. Another one is. And of course, by this time, he knew that I was interested in it. And he invited, if not even encouraged me to listen in on the conversations he was having with the tour guide and the bus driver and the hotel staff and the restaurant staff and all the myriad of people that you have conversations with while you're leading a tour over there. And I'm very grateful for that. And so I did listen to that. So after we got back from that trip, I made another trip down to Tampa to talk with him some more. And at the end of that trip, while we were talking, I said, well, I think I would like to try this. And I said, but I have a couple of caveats, a couple of stipulations. One is I do not, well, just one stipulation, but two reasons. I didn't want to do this on a year that he was going to lead a tour. And I did that for two reasons. First of all, this guy had led tours for 50 years. Within our brotherhood, if you list the top 3 people who know anything about biblical geography, Farrell's got to be in that list. So if I was going to have a tour the same year he was going to have a tour, I would lose. I would not win that battle. There's no way I would win that battle. But also, Farrell was getting older in years, and I didn't want to do anything that had the appearance that I was trying to push him out or anything. This guy's done this for 50 years. He deserves to do it as long as he wants to do it. And so we talked about that for a little while. And he finally told me that in 2014, he was not leading a tour to Israel. I think he was going to go to Turkey or somewhere like that, but he was not leading a tour. And I said, well, I'd kind of like to try it. He said, okay, go for it. And so I began working on it. Leading a tour is incredibly difficult. 99% of the work goes in before the plane takes off the ground. It's incredibly hard. There's so much to do, especially with your very first one. And for 2 years, I talked to as many people as I could. And come 2014, I had 28 brave souls go with me. And I led the tour and absolutely loved every aspect of it. From the planning to the organization to helping people understand everything. We even had a woman fall and was injured and 50 stitches on that trip. Loved it. The whole experience was just fantastic. And so I decided to do exactly that. I did it again. So in 2015, I led another tour over there. Farrell and I had spoken, and Farrell was going to lead a tour in 2016. So I was not going to travel to Israel in 2016. And then I got a phone call from that gentleman right back there, the one behind the camera. Craig DeHutt worships at a congregation in Indianapolis and regularly was teaching high school class. And a friend of his was teaching high school classes at another congregation in Indianapolis. And both Craig and this other gentleman their professional job is video creation. Stuart Peck is the other gentleman. He had a job, he was field producer for a couple of HGTV shows and did some freelance work. Craig did a lot of freelance work at the time. He was working for another company as well. And so they realized when they were teaching young people that when they brought video into the classroom, the kids just perked up. And so they wanted to use video in the classroom, but then they searched the internet for video. And the video all the videos they found fell into 2 categories. One was they were biblically accurate, but extremely poor quality. Or they were extremely good quality and not biblically accurate. And so they really were left, didn't have anything to do. And so they decided, wait a minute, God gave us these talents. Why don't we try to do this ourselves? And so the call I received from Craig was more about logistics. He wanted to know, okay, if we went to Capernaum, what could we film at Capernaum? If we went to Jericho, what could we film at Jericho? Things like that. And we had conversations for a couple of months. And then Craig called me one day and said, hey, would you want to be on camera? And I said, well, I've never done anything like that before, but we can edit video, right? We can. I said, well, I'm happy to help any way I can. And so that's what we did. And in 2016, I wasn't going to lead a tour, but I ended up going back to Israel that year and helping to film the first 5 episodes of Following the Messiah with Appian Media. In 2017, I went back to Israel twice. I led a tour, and then literally a week later, I went back to Israel and filmed episodes 6 through 10 of Following the Messiah. 2018, 2 trips again One was leading a tour. Another one was we filmed Searching for a King video series over there in Israel. 2019, I led another tour over there. In 2020, I had an Israel tour and a Turkey, Greece tour planned. I don't know if you remember, but we had a global pandemic that year. They literally shut the doors of Israel 6 days before we were scheduled to go over there. And so it was heartbreaking. So 2 trips planned, but weren't able to do that. In 2021, I led another tour to Israel. This was actually kind of a big deal because it was the first large group to go to Israel post-COVID. The Ministry of Tourism met us down at the airport, had us downtown for pictures and things like that. These travelers really had to kind of go through everything in order to go. They had to pass 4 different COVID tests before we were released to go into the country. In fact, we were quarantined. Anyway, it was blood tests and all kinds of things. So anyway, it was kind of a big deal. But we did another one in 2021. 2022, I led a tour to Israel, led a tour to Turkey, Greece. This was the one that was canceled or postponed from 2020. And then traveled with Appian Media again to Egypt to film some of the Out of Egypt things. 2023, I had a tour of Israel in the spring. And then I had another tour scheduled for October 16th of 2023. That, if you've been watching the news, that was 9 days after Hamas broke through the borders of Gaza and did what they did. And so we had to postpone that tour. We were able to get it in 2024. I had another tour in 2024 planned. That one was pushed because we just couldn't get the flights. It wasn't a safety issue, wasn't a security issue. We just couldn't get the flights. So we had to push that to this year. In fact, I was just over there 3 weeks ago with that tour. Lord willing, I'm going back to Israel in about 9 days with another tour. And then I have another tour actually in June. And then I've got 2 tours planned for 2026. So let me kind of put a bow around this real quick, and then let me make some comments. So in total, I've been to Israel 15 times. I've been to Egypt twice, Turkey, Greece, Jordan. And with regards to Appian Media, we've made over 30 hours of content. And those videos have been viewed over 20 million times in over 160 countries. Now, I don't say that to brag. I say that because I had got the opportunity to walk down this path because I'm a map nerd. If I had not been a map nerd, I never would have walked down this path. And look at the opportunities that God has blessed me with the help of my wife and my family and my friends, to do this. It's just incredibly humbling. So, you're probably asking the question, so what? What does this have to do with me? What does it have to do with you? That's a good question. My story has nothing to do with you. But your story will have everything to do with you. And so what I want to do really quick is to give you 3 pieces of advice. And then we'll have the invitation song, the lesson will be yours. I want to give you 3 pieces of advice because I've seen in the last 15 years or so what the good that can come about with having a passion and then following it. And I want to encourage all of you to do the same thing. So here's the 3 things here. First of all, simple, find your passion. This is something that you shouldn't rush. I was 42 years old before I made my first trip to Israel. And so, in some ways, I'm 57 now. So in some ways, I've only just kind of started. Don't rush this decision. Don't rush this process. Your passion will come to you. Maybe some of you have already figured out what it is, and that's great. But if you haven't, don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. But if you need help figuring out, let me give you two places to look. First of all, find your passion by thinking outside the box. And here's what I mean by that. It's easy to get caught because you're a preacher in the religion box, okay? But that may not be the best way to catch people, to convert people. Maybe you have passions that lay outside that religion box. Maybe it's fishing or some sort of sport, or you like theme parks or music or whatever. Follow it. Learn about it. Become experts in it. Then use that to build the relationships that we talked about earlier, to reach people that you might not have, that you wouldn't have reached from the pulpit. So think outside the box a little bit as you're thinking about that. The second thing is, not only do you want to think outside the box, well, before I leave that, let me make this comment. I know this process works, thinking outside the box, and all of you do too. You know of people who have been converted because of a relationship that was built because of something that happened outside the church building. And we have examples in the scripture of that. Jesus is walking through Samaria. He's hot, he's tired, he sits down next to a well. A woman comes up. He doesn't ask her about the head covering or how many times you serve the Lord's Supper on Sunday. He doesn't ask her about that. What does he ask her for? Can I have a glass of water? He's building the relationship. And then after that, what did they talk about? They talked about the water, then they talked about family. And then when the time was right, he talked to him about Jesus, talked to him about religion. And that's the way it works. That's the way it works. But so think outside the box. There'll be opportunities there. But find your passion also by thinking inside the box as well. I mean, that's sort of where my passion is. Biblical geography, I guess that's inside the box. Travel may go outside the box a little bit. But think about things that are inside the box. There may be some of you, unbelievably, that aren't fans of biblical geography. I don't understand that, but there's a myriad of other things. Perhaps you're interested in the beauty of the biblical languages, or the relationship between the prophets and Jesus, or old people, or younger people, or marrieds, or singles, or maybe biblical, marriage counseling. Something. Find something. Maybe it's music. Find something that you are passionate about, and use that for good. So that's the first thing. Find your passion, and do so by thinking inside and outside the box a little bit. The second thing is this. Once you've figured out what your passion is, that's a typo. Let it excite and encourage you, because your excitement and your encouragement is contagious. Let me tell you a couple stories. A couple years ago, I was leading a tour, and we were walking through Samaria, the ancient biblical city of Samaria. And we'd kind of finished our tour. We were kind of walking back to the bus, and I was walking down a dirt path, and there was a couple members of my group behind me. And one of the ladies said, "Hey, Barry." I said, "Yes." She said, "Where are we going next?" I said, "Well, we're done for the day. We're going to go back to Jerusalem to the hotel." And she said, "Oh, good. How long is that going to take?" And I said, "Oh, it'd be about 30 minutes. She said, "Oh, good. I can't wait to get back to the hotel so that I can..." And she stopped talking. And so I stopped and turned around, and tears were streaming out of her face. And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Oh, nothing's wrong. I was just thinking about what I was going to say. I said, what were you going to say? And she said, what I was going to say was, I couldn't wait to go back to the hotel and wash my feet. Now, she had read that phrase 1,000,000 times in her life, but it had never clicked that you could be walking through the lands of the Bible with sandals on and your feet get dirty. So I said, yeah. And right then I said a little prayer and thanked God for the opportunity for this woman to come over here and experience that. And for giving me the love of maps that helped that to happen. A year or so later, we were at Jericho, and I was standing there talking about Jericho and the city and the history and everything. And for those of you who've been there, you know this, but when you stand up on the top of Jericho, you can easily see across the Jordan River to the plains of Moab. And the people, remember the Israelites, after Moses died, they camped in the plains of Moab for 30 days, mourning his death. Well, the scriptures doesn't say that the people from Jericho could see them, but when you visit, you realize they could absolutely see 2 or 3 million, however many people it was. They could absolutely see them over there. And of course, those people had heard about the Israelites. They knew what the Israelites and the God of the Israelites could do. And so I was pointing all that out and talking about all that. And we usually talk for a minute, my guide and I, and then we give people the time to walk around. The gentleman walked up to me and he said, I've learned more about Jericho in the last 8 minutes than I have in my entire life. I can't wait to go back and reteach a class to my congregation back at home. Well, that made my day. Because that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Third, real quickly, these videos have been seen, as I said, 20 million times. And so because of that, I wasn't prepared for this, but every now and then I'm recognized. And about 3 years ago, I was walking through this, I was leading a tour, walking through Caesarea, and this gentleman from another tour group jumps over, grabs me by the, are you Barry Britnell? Who's asking? No, yes, I am. And to be honest with you, I really didn't know what to say. I was kind of taken back by it and didn't know what to say. And, I tried to be humble and polite as I could. And then 2 days later, we were at Dan. 3 women from another group jumped out. You're Barry Britnell. And took pictures of me and everything. So one of the people in my tour group saw both those happen, and he could kind of see how uncomfortable I was. And so he kind of pulled me over the side and he said, hey, what y'all are doing is good work. This is the evidence of it. You have no idea who these people are or where in the world they came from. But they are hearing and seeing what y'all are producing. God is providing opportunities to you because of this. And you know what? He's right. 2 days later, we were at Masada. It happens again. This gentleman just walks up to me. This time, I hopefully I handled it a little bit better. Because I'll only see that guy one time, and I've got 10 seconds to say something to him. And 3 days later, we were at the Israel Museum. Again, it happened again. I've tried to get better with it because you only have one chance to talk to these people for 15 seconds, and you got to make it work. That was something I was not expecting. It's related to a little aside. I've actually been spotted twice in 2025 so far, and this is perhaps indicative of the kind of where I hang out and the kind of people I hang out with. But I've been spotted twice. One is at the Garden of Gethsemane, and the other one is at Buc-ee's. And so anyway, that was a little odd, but I had my beaver nuggets and I was ready to go. But anyway, so let your passion excite and encourage you, because when that happens, it will excite and encourage others. And you have no idea who you might be able to contact and who you might be able to touch with Jesus. Which leads me to my third point. Don't let your passion dominate you. Don't let it dominate you. It's easy to spend time and spend your thoughts doing and thinking about things that you love, you absolutely love. That's just human nature. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's easy to get overly engrossed with that. Don't forget to make the main thing the main thing. Your passion is not the end game. Your passion is a way to get people to the end game. Philip is walking out toward Gaza, sees a gentleman in a chariot, says, "Do you know what you're reading?" The gentleman says, "How can I unless someone helps me?" And I love the verse there because it says, Philip got into the chariot and beginning at the scripture, taught him about Jesus. When Philip got into that chariot, he knew where he wanted the conversation to end. He wanted it to end with Jesus. It doesn't matter how many times I've been to Israel and how many people I take with me over there. And it doesn't matter how many views these videos have on YouTube. If those same people aren't leaving the tour or walking away from the videos and opening up their Bibles to read about Jesus, then this is all for naught. Don't forget what the end game is, because that's everything. That's everything. So, we're tired. Time to go to bed. That's my message for tonight. Find your passion by thinking outside and inside the box. Let it excite you and encourage you so that you can excite and encourage others. But don't be distracted by it. Remember to keep the end game the end game. One other thing I do want to say, and that is, thank you to all you gentlemen. I feel bad saying this because I've already admitted that I'm not a preacher and I really haven't had any desire to be a preacher. But our kingdom needs preachers. And I am so thankful to all of you, the ones who preach, all of you who preach and do what you can to spread the news about Jesus, because that's what it's all about. And there's a variety of reasons why men your age are not preaching. That's something I feel like we all need to work on. We need to encourage people to do that. But I'm deeply thankful for all of you. That's it. I'm happy to do a Q&A if you have a Q&A. I'm also happy exiting stage right. But okay.
Probably when you first went, though, like I'd never been out to the Holy Land. What was like the most surprising thing to you? I know that's a really open-ended question. What was like the most surprising thing to you about the geography of the Holy Land?
Well, let me say too, Tim, Kevin, Phil, Joe, Kenny, Craig, Russ, you can ask them the same question. I've been blessed with a bunch of people traveling with me, and all these gentlemen have traveled with me. And you can ask them the same question. I would say it's all about geography. I am blown away by the geographical diversity of such a small piece of land. For instance, if you take the tribal allotments, if you just look at the map in the back of your Bible, it seems to be a random assortment of land with weird drawn things. But there's a reason why those borders are where they are. And every single tribal allotment has pros and cons to their little allotment. And you have to study the geography to understand why it was important. You're talking about a land that's 150 miles from north to south, 50 miles east-west. Elevation ranges from over 9,000 feet in elevation to negative 1,300 feet. It has hills, it has valleys. I often make this comment on my tours is, my tours are, quite frankly, are not easy. They're difficult. We do a lot of walking. And people usually make a comment about it, and I say that there's only, to my knowledge, and I may show my ignorance here in front of this crowd, there's only 2 overweight people in the Bible. Can you name who they are? Ehud and Eli. What do those 2 guys have in common? What did they do all day? Sit. They sat all day. People, those lands are hilly, and people did a lot of walking. They were in good shape. Anyway, I think the geographic diversity of the land. There's a lot of other little things too, like I'm kind of blown away by how small the Sea of Galilee is. I mean, we would call it a lake, but it's a sea, and there's a reason I think too. But I'll tell you that sometime when you come over. Anyway,
About how much do those trips cost?
I've got a flyer right here. No, they're about $5,500 round trip from New York. Yeah, Zach.
What story can you not fully understand without knowing the geography?
Okay, his question was, what story can you not fully understand? Let me answer the question this way. When we all get to heaven, the percentage of people that will have been to Israel and are in heaven is going to be incredibly small. I say that to say this. I always try to be really careful about talking about Israel, because I don't want it to sound like I'm some sort of super Christian because I've been to Israel. That does not make you a super Christian. It is just another tool in your toolbox. But there's a lot of other tools that a lot of you have that I don't have in my toolbox. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm smarter or anything, but there's so many stories. The David and Goliath story is interesting because when you stand there, you realize how small it was, and how, the scriptures tell us that Goliath stood there and yelled up into the hills. And when you're there, you can say, absolutely, the Israelites could hear. And absolutely, the Philistines saw their giant fall. I mean, they saw the whole thing. And so, it's just, I don't know, stories like that. And realizing too, well, let me say it this way. The night that Jesus was arrested and tried and later crucified, we read that entire passage in about 5 minutes. And we see phrases like, he was led to Annas and Caiaphas. He was led to the Sanhedrin. He was led to Pilate. You have to go and realize how far those places are from each other, and how it was up and down hills, and how long he had been awake, and all the physical abuse he was going through, and the fact that he was bound while doing all that. You get better perspective. Then the phrase, he was led to Annas and Caiaphas, takes on completely different meaning. Because the walk from Garden of Gethsemane to Annas and Caiaphas would have been most of a mile, up and down hills, bound, after he'd been awake at that point for 20 hours at least. And that was only the beginning of his trials. Anyway, things like that. I'll close by just reminding, find your passion, cultivate it, and use it for good.